All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is daily vlog number 156, and today we are going to beseech the divine entities for healing powers. Yes, it is time for us to talk about clerics. First, I need a drink. Hold, please. Here we go. See, and then I have like 5 bottles left in this package, and then all my other cases of water down here, and so I just have this kind of conglomeration of plastic and then actual cases of water. So I'm gonna get a drink. So, the cleric, the priest, whatever you want to call it, was one of the 3 original classes in original D&D. You had fighting man, magic user, and cleric or priest. I can't remember which one they were called. I think it was cleric. And the idea behind the cleric is really, really simple. We need a healer. Like, that's what it is. It's the entire kind of function behind the original 3 classes was you had one class that was strong and was able to use weapons and kind of get up close. You had another class that was weak but was a glass cannon and could cast all this magic. Then you had a third class that just kept everybody alive. And because of that, there has been a problem with cleric class design that has persisted for almost 50 years without too many derivations. And that is playing the healer is boring. From a class design perspective, because that's always what these are meant to go back to. A cleric makes up a necessary part of a game like this, where the players themselves, their characters are meant to survive multiple combats, whereas the enemies are only meant to exist long enough for the combat to resolve. And so because of that, the players are going to start getting worn down, and there has to be a system built in that allows them to regain some of those resources in order for there to be a resource management aspect to the game. Because if the only way to heal is to take a long rest, then that effectively means that if a battle is hard enough, then everyone is just going to do one battle, long rest, one battle, long rest. And that throws off the balance of the entire game, because it effectively means that all of your abilities are effectively daily abilities. If you're only having one big combat encounter per day and nothing else, then yes, all of your abilities are daily abilities. And it makes balancing difficult, because if you want to have really, really powerful abilities, you need to have a way to limit their power so that they don't just become the right answer. Again, good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers. And so if every time you get access to, let's say, a new level of spells, the previous tier of spells becomes completely useless, well, then there's no reason to still have those in the game. If you're always going to be only casting your highest level spells, then having, 3 third level slots and then 4 second level and 5 first level, it doesn't really matter, because you're never going to use those lower ones, and it's always going to be a better idea to use your third level slots. So coming up with a way to regain some resources, particularly hit points, is essential. And different games has done that in different ways. In later editions of D&D, they started introducing short rests, which allowed players to effectively heal themselves a little bit. But since the very beginning of D&D, they have had another thing. They've had a character whose sole purpose was to regain hit points and just help the party deal with the more negative aspects of adventuring. Healing wounds, removing diseases, the things like that. However, from a player perspective, when everyone else is like going in is like, I take my great sword and I cleave the kobold in half, and then I spin around and cleave a second kobold, then I spin one more time and cleave a third one in twine. And then the magic user comes up and goes, I collect arcane energy around me and form it into a ball of fire that I throw into the middle of this group, and it explodes, setting all of them ablaze and disintegrating them. And then the cleric comes up and goes, I go over and I touch him, and his boobies go away. His boo-boos. Wow. Guys, it has been a long day, and I've only been awake for an hour. His injuries go away. Anyway, it was meant to be boo-boos. We're gonna pretend that never happened. No one here is gonna comment about it. No one here is gonna even acknowledge it because it totally didn't happen. So going back to game design, being the cleric just really wasn't that much fun, because even when you were playing a really important role in the party, it didn't feel important. Because even if you were healing a lot, first of all, there was always a maximum amount you can heal, where there really wasn't a maximum amount of damage you can do. Theoretically, you could kill more damage than the enemy had hit points. But a lot of times DMs won't tell you how many hit points over you did, so it just feels like you're doing a lot of damage. And when you hit their hit point maximum, they're dead, they're gone. When you heal a player and you heal them above their hit point maximum, there's no benefit to that. They don't get supercharged, you don't get nothing. So being a healer just really wasn't that fun, especially since all the way up until 4th edition, that was what you had to use your action during your turn to do. You really couldn't do anything else. So that meant that every turn, even though clerics did get, even early clerics did get some abilities that allowed them to do something other than I'm going to heal, 9 times out of 10 in combat, you were forced to use your action to heal. And that was 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition. That's how playing a cleric worked. Unless you wanted to play the always maligned, non-healing cleric and just focus exclusively on, doing damage, kind of like a wizard. But then you ran into different problems, because the cleric has a massive part of their kit dedicated to healing damage, curing diseases, and other debuffs and things like that. They're never going to be able to compete damage-wise with a mage or a magic user whose sole focus is on dealing damage. And so even if you did play a non-healing cleric and got chased away from almost every table you ever sat down at, you still were feeling like I am playing second fiddle to everybody, because my most powerful spells are healing spells. And while yes, I do get some kind of interesting attack spells, they always feel like lesser versions of what the magic user has been able to do for a couple levels already. And so that becomes the biggest issue with class design for healing-based characters, is finding a way to create a healing-based character that's actually fun to play and can do more than just spend every turn going, I heal thee, I heal thee, I heal thee, I heal thee, I heal thee. Oh, what? Yeah, I'm healing again. What? No, I can talk. Yeah, just healing. Heal. Yeah, no, I don't I don't even actually have to pay attention to the combat because all I have to do is when my turn comes up, I just go, "Hey, who is the lowest hit points? Heal." Yeah, no, I was thinking about maybe going to the bar afterwards, but then I had heal. Then I remembered that I have to heal again tonight, so and that's all it becomes. Um, so as far as like systems required for a cleric, if we're doing this in the order that I've been doing it, where we created a fighter, then we created a magic user, then we created a thief, technically all the systems already exist. You already have a hit point style system because the fighter needed that from the beginning for the combat system. You already have a magic system because the magic user needed that as well. And that's really all the cleric needs is they need something to heal and they need a way to do it. However, if you want to make an interesting cleric that's able to do more than just sit on the phone and heal, you need to come up with a third system. Basically, a system that allows for multiple things to happen during the same turn. And I'm going to go to my beautiful 5th edition, or 4th edition. Brain just isn't working today, guys. I'm going to go to my beautiful 4th edition to show you a version of healer, a version of cleric that worked beautifully well. So, 4th edition introduced the minor action. 3rd edition kind of had something akin to that, where you had a move and an action, and you could also do a thing called a full action, which basically used both your move and your action to be able to do something extra cool. Generally, like fighters, to get their extra attack, would have to take a full action, or there were certain abilities that required a full action. They also introduced a reaction style mechanic, but we're not talking about that right now. Reactions we'll deal with later. Fourth edition, though, introduced what was called the minor action. And it changed how action economy worked for a lot of different RPGs in general, simply because it was a massively useful addition. What it was in 4th edition, you had a move action that allowed you to move. You had a standard action, which was what most players would use to make their attacks, use all of their different powers. The vast majority of those were standard actions. And then you had minor actions. And minor actions did a lot of different things. There were some minor actions that allowed you to do things like, for the sword mage, they were part of the defender role, and all defenders had an ability to mark a character. And all a mark was it basically gave that character an incentive to attack the defender versus anyone else. If they tried to attack anyone else, they would have a penalty to their attack rolls. The original defender, the fighter, they were able to mark anyone that they hit with an attack. And so marking was just a free action that happened when you made an attack against a creature. However, as you started getting forward, they started using the minor action for marking for a couple different classes. And the sword mage was my favorite. The way that they marked is they could choose a target within 5 squares of them. So that's within 25 feet of them. And they would just be able to mark them at range. And depending on which flavor of sword mage they were, they could do different things. So that was one of the things that minor actions started being able to do. There was other things like sometimes minor actions would give you a little bit extra damage, or they'd allow you to impose a status effect on an enemy. But they were generally designed to be another thing that you can do that simply just wasn't an extra attack. Because you already had a system for doing attacks, and that was your standard action. So if you wanted something that was a little bit more minor, you turn it into a minor action. Well, healers in 4th edition were called leaders. And each leader had a different way to heal other party members. But the one unifying aspect of it was, for the most part, healers were able to heal as a minor action. So if you were playing a cleric was one of the first leaders that was introduced in the game, is in Player's Handbook 1. If you were playing a cleric As your standard action, you could call down a pillar of light and fire to attack a group of enemies. And then as your minor action, you could look at another character and allow them to spend a healing surge, which was how healing worked in 4th edition. This is another thing that made it really, really useful that we'll come back to when we get back to talking about the Cleric again. But what that meant is clerics in 4th edition almost always had a chance to do really amazing, awesome stuff, and then they could also heal. And so by introducing this third style of action, first of all, it allows for other classes to have interesting things that they can do with their minor action. In 5th edition, it turned into what's called a bonus action. And to be perfectly honest, bonus actions are not nearly as utilized as the minor action was. Bonus actions are literally that. They are a bonus action. They're an extra action. So there's quite a few classes that don't actually have a use for their bonus action. And you either have to use feats or other things to give you the ability to use that. In 4th edition, almost every class by default had something they could use their minor action for. And if they didn't get it at first level, they eventually could get it later on. So, yes, adding an additional type of action can turn the cleric from a really boring class to being able to really focus in on that class fantasy. That idea that when people are choosing this class, they are imagining this really cool character that can do really cool stuff. And in general, with a few rare exceptions, I don't think I've ever seen someone that has picked a cleric with their class fantasy in mind of, oh, I just go around healing people. Because that, again, it's kind of boring and it takes away most of your player agency. Because you generally don't get to choose who to heal. You're going to have to heal the person that needs it the most. Which can give you a little bit of player agency. Because if two people have lost the same amount of hit points, you can kind of go, well, you know, this person has more hit points in general, so they can do that. Or this person has more damage mitigation power in general, so I'm going to wait to heal them and I'm going to heal this other person. That was really the most player agency you had in combat as a cleric, because you weren't choosing who the enemies attacked, the enemies were. And a lot of times, if the party was built correctly, the enemies weren't really choosing who they attacked. It was how the players were playing that incentivized the enemies to attack certain party members. So in reality, the rest of the group was playing your character in combat with a cleric. And that's just not fun. At that point, why do you even need a player to do it? Just have every group have a random NPC that just heals the lowest hit point party member. Like that would effectively do everything that a really, really basic cleric does, and it doesn't mean that a player has to sit there basically sitting in for an NPC. So one of the ways that we can fix the issue with clerics being a very passive class is add an additional action. Now, that adds a lot of complexity to the game because, again, once you add an additional action type that you can do, that means every class can utilize that in some way, shape, or form. Unless you specifically make it so that only clerics can use this special healing type action, which can create its own issues, you're going to have to really evaluate, is that a route that I want to go? Now, a lot of RPGs use the 3-action system. And what I mean by the 3-action system is a move action, a standard or major action, and then a bonus or minor action. A lot of RPGs use it. Obviously, 5th edition uses it. 4th edition did use it. Pathfinder 2nd edition uses it. They just removed the differentiation, which caused its own set of problems. Because being able to replace your move action and your bonus action with just 3 attacks massively breaks the game. And so they had to create these really, really weird additional attack rules that make it so you can't make extra attacks until you're like level 6 or 7, which also means you can't really dual wield until you're level 6 or 7, because that uses the exact same rules as a barbarian with a great axe going up and just cleaving 3 different people, as a rogue going up, poking someone with a rapier and trying to stab them with a dagger in his offhand. So anyway, so the 3-action system has existed for over a decade. And there's a lot of different systems that you can look to for guidance as far as how you would want to design a system like that. On the other hand, if you want to stick to a 2-action system, you move, you attack. Or if you want to do a single-action system, which happens in games like the Cypher system or Fabula Ultima, one of the things that you can do is, again, we already have a magic system, and the magic system is generally going to be how the cleric heals. So when you are designing cleric spells specifically, design them so that they do something, and then as an after effect, they can also heal. That tends to be a little bit more complicated than just having an additional action that they can just go off and heal with, because every single spell that you design that's going to have a healing aspect, you have to figure out, okay, how much should the healing, or how well should the healing work? What kind of limitation could that be? Because if you have a cleric that can call down a pillar of flame and as part of the same action heal everybody, well, then they are going to be kind of usurping the position of the magic user, because now, even if their attacks are a little bit less powerful than the magic user, they have that additional benefit of they also keep the party alive. And so now the magic user kind of feels left out, because all they can do is damage, and so become significantly less useful as a member of the party. So if you want to go the either two action or single action system with a cleric, a simple way to allow a cleric to be able to do more than just heal is give at least some of their offensive abilities the ability to also heal. And a nice way to balance that off is the heals that you get with a standard action that also does damage are just going to be a lesser heal. They're going to be less useful than using your entire action to just heal. And that gives player agency back to the cleric. Because again, a lot of times they're not going to be able to choose who they get to heal. Because again, that is going to be dictated by who needs the healing the most. With a few very rare exceptions, it's always going to be dictated by what's going on the board. But if they can go, all right, I think it would be in our best interest if I reduce the hit points of the enemies while getting a little bit of hit points back, because overall I think that will be better for the or for this particular combat. Or, you know what, things are going bad enough, and even if we take this dude out, there's 3 others that are going to swarm this dude. I'm going to use my entire action to heal him. That was one of the things in 4th edition that the majority of cleric's standard action powers were mostly kind of damage dealing style things. A few of them would also have healing abilities built into them, or would be pure healing buff types of stuff. And so it really, playing a leader in 4th edition was so much fun, because you had so many different tools at your disposal. You generally had a limited number of your minor action heals per encounter. They were generally encounter powers, and you would be able to use that encounter power like twice per encounter. So it was a minor action. However, you could only use it twice. So you still did need to decide when and where to use it to be most effective. But if you were in a really tough combat and more people were getting hurt than you could afford to use your minor action heal for, you could use your major action to sometimes heal the group, sometimes heal an individual, sometimes do damage and heal, sometimes put some kind of buff on the party. Like, there was lots of different things that you could do in order to be able to still be the leader and the healer of the team, but not just be sitting back going, heal, 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 heal. And for me, it is by far the most fun I've ever had at a table. Not even playing, I don't think I ever played a leader, but every leader in every game that I ever played in 4th edition just had an absolute blast doing it. Like, it was so much fun to be at a table with them. We had one dude that played, I think he was a warlord. Warlord was a healer. It was a strength-based healer. He was a fighter that could heal. And it was such a cool idea because when the warlord wasn't healing, they were just giving out actions to other players. They'd go, okay, you go ahead and use an attack power. And so it was effectively like getting double attacks in a turn. And it was just massively fun to play with a warlord because they could keep you alive, but they also were this offensive powerhouse. Not because they were doing any damage. Warlords generally didn't do a ton of damage. It's because they had so many different abilities that allowed them to either increase the damage of other players or outright just give them actions so that they could do cool stuff. So yeah, like, to me, that is peak Cleric, is having the ability to do a more refined version of the class fantasy, which is basically this holy spellcaster that is devoted to a deity or a set of values. And I guess because we haven't really defined cleric as far as it goes for just tabletop RPGs in general, a cleric is in general going to be a spellcaster. Which, again, spellcaster just means, in general, being able to do things that effectively break the physics of the world that you're in some way, shape, or form. It could be the spells are gadgets. It could be the spells are potions. But it's just something that, without this additional type of power, normal human would not be able to do these. And a cleric needs to be devoted to a set of values. Anything that has a religious aspect to it, a cleric is going to be devoted to a deity of some form. But you don't need to have deities and religion in your tabletop RPG to still have a cleric style character. They just need to be devoted to a set of values. So you could have a science cleric who is devoted to the acquisition of knowledge, and to, you know, the sanctity of unbiased research and things like that. Like, they could very easily create a cleric type character. So when I say cleric, 30 minutes into the video, that's what I'm referring to as a spellcaster who has devoted themselves specifically to a set of values, generally associated with a deity or other religious figure, but not exclusive to that. So when we're looking at that, and they have to have some kind of healing aspect to that. So when we're looking at that kind of class fantasy, being able to heal is either a minor / bonus action, or being able to heal as part of another action vastly changes the class fantasies you can portray. If someone does want to be that character of I control who lives and dies, no one dies on my watch, and being kind of the super doctor, they can still do that with a character that has the ability to choose whether or not they use their action to heal or to harm and heal, and isn't required to always use their action to heal. But it also opens up the door for that kind of righteous indignation style character that comes out and goes, you guys have pissed off my God, you have blasphemed them, and I will now show you while you don't piss off a god. This is a sample of the wrath of my deity. Boom! Oh, by the way, you don't die until I tell you to die. Boom! So, yeah, when you can portray a character like that, first of all, it gives a much wider range of characters you can play. Again, original D&D, for as groundbreaking as it was, fighters were fighters were fighters were fighters. Or fighting men were fighting men were fighting men were fighting men. And there wasn't a ton of differentiation between them. Yes, you could have a ranged-based fighting man versus an upfront fighting man, or a sword and board versus a greatsword. Yes, they did play a little bit differently, but not by that much. And magic users were magic users were magic users. Yes, you could choose different spells, but for the most part, in combat, you were looking for whatever spell did the most damage. And then clerics had the least amount of differentiation because their actions were so often, I heal, I heal, I heal, I heal, I heal. So when you get them out of that rut of, I have to use my action to heal or else I'm not doing my class justice, you allow for a significantly wider spread of characters to exist. Instead of I heal, I heal, I heal, you could have one person who is the kind of dark cleric who spends most of their time, causing debilitations and the things like that, spreading plague and all that stuff, and then ever so often keeping their party alive as a side effect of that. And that can create interesting gameplay mechanics. Like if you want to play a death cleric style character, instead of flavoring it as I do damage and I also heal, you can flavor it as I attack you and I start to draw your life force out and I throw it into this person. Mechanically, not a whole lot changes. That person's losing hit points and this person is gaining hit points. However, the flavor of it is zoom, take some of his life force. You, zoom, take some of their life force. You, zoom, take all their life force and give it to me because num num num, that's tasty. Like, that's a really cool character. And the background for a character like that and the motivations for a character like that are going to be massively different than the character that goes, I smite you with divine light, and I also bless you with my deity's saving grace. They're going to be motivated by a very, very different thing, and they're going to take different actions. And the only thing that has changed between those two characters is the flavor of the spells. Mechanics, they're doing the exact same thing. And so that's why expanding mechanics for a cleric when you're designing a game can have such a profound impact on players wanting to choose that class. Because now you can add in spells and things like that just flavor things, or even just make suggestions to players that, by the way, this particular spell that we're going to call Fire Cleanse is you burn that character and then you cleanse that character something else. And that's basically all it does. However, if you wanted to play a Death Cleric style character, you can instead flavor it that you take the affliction that's hurting this person, you burn it out of them, and then use that affliction to cause damage to another person. Again, mechanics have not changed, but by changing the flavor like that, the spell feels entirely different. And again, it will vastly change how the players play the class. So I hope that kind of inspires you guys, for anyone that is thinking along the game design routes, even if you're not designing your own system, you're just designing supplements for 5th edition or the Cypher system or anything like that. Understanding those 4 kind of major character archetypes that have existed since 1975 was when the Greyhawk supplement came out and introduced thieves. Those 4 character classes really can be used to describe just about every other character. it is so close, or that is such a true fact that fourth edition, they had roles effectively, where all the different classes were under one of four roles, and those roles were warrior, wizard, rogue, and priest. Those are the four roles. And so both fighters and paladins were warrior roles, along with like barbarians and things like that. Those were all warriors. Whereas bards and thieves, and I think rangers too, fit under the rogue category. I can't actually remember if rogues were a warrior or a rogue, but they theoretically could fit in both. Wizards, the wizard category included mages, which was your standard wizard, and then all the specialist mages and sorcerers eventually got put under there. And then for the priest, you had clerics, druids, and other kind of specialty clerics and stuff like that. So when you understand the kind of game design aspects around those four key character types, which is one, weapon-based characters, which are your fighters; two, your out-of-combat stealth-based characters, which are your thieves; three, your magic-using style characters, which are your wizards; and four, your divine healing type characters, which are your priests or clerics. You really can start to kind of mix and match and create really every other character that exists. For the most part, every other character in D&D and just about every other tabletop RPG is a mixture of one of those four aspects. Rangers are a combination warrior and rogue because they are required to be sneaky and stuff like that for the hunter aspect, but they also are very, very good at using weapons and doing things like that. A paladin is a combination warrior and priest, where they are weapon-based. They can go up and get dirty and damage, but they are devoted to a set of ideals and can heal a little bit because of that. They have a little bit of spellcasting power. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted to kind of go over these four kinds of classes, was really to show how mixing and matching those four archetypes can really give you almost unlimited combinations as far as the unique classes that you can design, or subclasses that you can design, however you want to go about it. So anyway, it's going to be all for me today, and I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.